I told you to stay on your side.
You don't tell me where to go.
This land is mine!
Only because you took it.
The entire town could not stop laughing when the cowboy spent his last savings on a piece of land they all called worthless. They said he had made the worst mistake of his life, a deal that would ruin his future. But everything changed the day Apache riders arrived without warning. Their leader stepped onto the land, looked around in silence, and then spoke words that made everyone stop and listen. What he revealed turned the cowboys' so-called foolish purchase into something no one in the town was ready for. The town of Red Valley was the kind of place where news traveled faster than the wind. Everyone knew everyone, and every decision was discussed as if it belonged to the whole town. So when Jonah Miller bought a piece of land outside the edge of town, it did not stay a private matter for long. The land was far from impressive. It sat beyond the last line of fences, where the soil turned dry and the ground became rough and uneven. No one farmed there. No cattle grazed there. Most people believed nothing of value could ever grow on it. Jonah had recently received a small inheritance after his father passed away. People expected him to use it carefully. Some thought he would expand his herd. Others believed he might repair his aging barn or invest in better equipment. Instead, he surprised everyone. He used the money to buy that land. By the next morning, the news had already reached every corner of Red Valley. In the saloon, men laughed as they talked about it. "That Miller boy bought the worst land in the county," one man said. Another shook his head. He could have made something of himself, but he chose that empty stretch of dirt. At the counter, Marcus Hale listened with a satisfied smile. He was the wealthiest rancher in the area and had never hidden his opinion of Jonah. "That boy made a mistake he will regret for a long time," Marcus said. Outside, Jonah walked past the same people who were now talking about him. He did not respond to their words. He simply kept going. Each day, he rode out to the land alone. He cleared brush, marked boundaries, and studied the ground carefully as if it held something others could not see. Most people thought he was wasting his time. Jonah did not explain himself. He only remembered something his father once told him. Land does not always show its worth at first sight. 2 days after Jonah Miller began working the land, something unusual happened in Red Valley. Early in the morning, a rider came rushing into town saying he had seen strangers near the old property beyond the ridge. By noon, the news had spread everywhere. By afternoon, people were already gathering along the dusty road that led out of town. Jonah was at the land when he first saw them. 5 riders approached from the west, moving at a steady pace. They did not rush, and they did not speak to one another. There was a calm seriousness in the way they carried themselves. Jonah stopped his work and watched. When they reached the edge of the property, the leader raised a hand and the group stopped. He dismounted slowly. He was older than the others, with deep lines across his face and eyes that seemed to study everything at once. He walked toward Jonah. "My name is Dakota," he said. Jonah gave a small nod. "Jonah Miller." Dakota did not answer right away. Instead, he looked across the land as if he was searching for something buried in the air itself. Then his attention moved to the ground Jonah had been clearing. The carved stones. Dakota knelt beside them and brushed away the remaining dust. A long silence followed. Behind them, people from Red Valley had begun to gather at a distance. They whispered among themselves, unsure of what they were seeing. Finally, Dakota stood. "This place is known to us," he said. Jonah frowned slightly. "Known how?" Dakota turned to face him. "This ground was once a meeting place for our people. Councils were held here. Decisions were made here that affected many lives." A few of the townspeople laughed quietly at the idea, but stopped when Dakota spoke again. "What you see here is only what remains on the surface." He looked at Jonah directly. "The rest is still buried." Jonah felt a shift in the air around him, as if the land he had just purchased was no longer as empty as he once believed. Dakota returned 3 days later, but he did not come alone. This time, he brought 2 elders with him. Their movements were slow, but their presence carried a quiet certainty that made the watching townspeople step back without being told. Jonah was already waiting at the land when they arrived. He had not told anyone, but something inside him had made it difficult to stay away. The elders walked straight to the carved stones. They did not rush or speak. They simply observed, as if reading something written long ago. Then one of them pointed toward a patch of ground near the hillside. Dakota translated. "He says there is something beneath this place." Jonah nodded and fetched a shovel. He began to dig. The soil was harder than it looked. Every layer revealed more rocks, more resistance. The crowd behind them grew larger, but no one spoke loudly now. Even Marcus Hale stood at the edge of the group, watching without his usual confidence. After some time, the shovel struck something solid. Jonah stopped immediately. Carefully, he cleared the dirt with his hands. A flat stone appeared beneath the surface. It was different from the others, larger and more deeply set into the ground. Dakota stepped forward and knelt beside it. The elders exchanged quiet words. Then they nodded. Over the next hours, more digging followed. What they uncovered was not random. It formed a pattern. A path made of stone stretched across part of the land, disappearing into the base of the hillside. It had been hidden for a very long time. As more of it appeared, the crowd grew silent. Jonah stood back, his hands covered in dust, watching what was emerging from beneath the ground he had purchased so casually. That evening, when most people had left, Jonah sat near the uncovered stones with Dakota. "Why did no one remember this?" Jonah asked. Dakota looked toward the darkening hills. "Because memory can be buried just like stone," he said. "And when people forget to look, it stays buried." Jonah said nothing. For the first time, he understood that the land was not simply soil and rock. It was a record of something that had been waiting a very long time to be seen again. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Red Valley was no longer quiet. Word had spread about what was uncovered on Jonah Miller's land. People came from nearby towns, some out of curiosity, others out of doubt. What they found was impossible to ignore. The stone path uncovered by Jonah and the elders was real. It was not natural formation. It had been placed with purpose. Alongside it, more fragments were discovered. Tools, broken pottery, old markings that matched the earlier stones. Dakota and the elders moved carefully through each discovery, explaining nothing unless asked. Their focus was steady, as if they were confirming something they had always known. Historians arrived soon after. They examined the site, compared it with old maps, and began searching through archived records. What they found created tension in town. Several older maps did not match newer ones. Boundaries had shifted over time. Certain details had been erased or changed. The land Jonah owned had once been part of a wider area used by Apache groups for gatherings and travel. As these findings became public, conversations in Red Valley grew uneasy. Marcus Hale tried to dismiss the discoveries, saying they were being misinterpreted. But people were no longer as quick to accept his words. One evening, Marcus approached Jonah near the edge of the site. "You should sell it," Marcus said quietly. Jonah looked at him. "No." Marcus frowned. "You do not understand what this will bring you." Jonah glanced at the stone path behind him. "I think I am starting to understand more than I did before." Marcus said nothing else and walked away. That night, Jonah sat alone near the uncovered stones. The wind moved across the land, carrying a strange stillness with it. For the first time, Red Valley was not arguing about a purchase. It was confronting a history it had never truly faced. A few months later, the land outside Red Valley was no longer just a stretch of forgotten ground. It had become a protected site. Officials, historians, and Apache elders worked together to preserve what had been uncovered. The stone path was marked carefully. The artifacts were documented and stored with respect. Plans were made to ensure the place would not be disturbed again. Jonah Miller stood quietly near the edge of the site as the work continued. He did not speak much. He did not need to. Dakota walked up beside him. "You were not like the others," he said. Jonah looked at him. "I almost was." Dakota shook his head slightly. "No. Others do not stop to listen." Jonah turned his gaze toward the land. The same place people had once laughed about now carried a different feeling. It was no longer empty. It was no longer ignored. It had a voice again. Across the distance, Marcus Hale watched from his horse. He said nothing. The certainty he once carried had faded, replaced by something quieter. Jonah remembered his father's words. Land does not always show its worth at first sight. Now he understood what that meant. As the sun began to set, Jonah stood where the first stones had been found. The wind moved across the ground gently, as if nothing had ever been lost at all. The town had once called him a fool. But in the end, he was the one who listened when no one else would. And that is how a land everyone called worthless became the center of a discovery that changed everything Red Valley believed about its own past. Jonah Miller did not become famous for being the smartest or the richest. He became remembered for something far simpler. He chose to listen when others chose to laugh. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Jonah's place, would you have trusted your own judgment and bought that land, or would you have walked away like everyone else expected? Write your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. There are always more hidden truths waiting to be uncovered. See you